Hello everyone and welcome to the Crowcast preview. I'm your host Scorpus, and with me tonight on the cast, returning from many weeks ago, is Hank. How you doing tonight?
Good to be on.
Yeah, I guess we've got a bit of competition up against the Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn match, which should be a bit of a cracking game, I reckon. But for those listening live, thanks for joining in. But I suspect most people probably listen to the recording because our game is all the way on Sunday this week. We're heading over to the MCG for the second week in a row to face Carlton. It's on Sunday at 1:10 p.m. local time for us here in Melbourne. And the changes that we've made, we'll get into those right away. Because of the Sunday game, of course, we've got the squad coming in. So ins are Seedsman, Miller, Henderson and Kelly. And coming out is Luke Brown, unfortunately, with a 1 to 2 week groin injury. Hank, who do you see coming in this week?
I reckon Seedsman was playing pretty well when he got injured, so I would say he's probably the most likely. He doesn't necessarily fit Luke Brown's role as a pure defender, so that's probably more Jake Kelly. I can't comment on Jake Kelly's SNFL form because I haven't really seen it that much, but you'd have to say the Seed is the likely inclusion. It'll be. I would have actually said potentially two, maybe Kelly and Seedsman, considering Brown as the player that's out. But looking at the bench, all the players on the bench are either in form or are the ones that have been brought into the 25-man squad. So, and I can't, unless other than maybe Miller for McGovern, but I don't think that's going to happen. Lyons is playing well. Unlikely. Lyons is playing well. Atkins is on fire. And Seed, Henderson and Kelly are the other additions. So I would say it's probably just going to be the one change, and I would say Seedsman's the most likely. Maybe they'll change up their structure a little bit just to have a more running defender fill Brown's role.
Yeah, I reckon. I think I agreed as well. I think some people on the board are thinking that maybe Kelly for that like-to-like inclusion, but judging by what people have been saying who have been attending those SNFL games, Kelly hasn't been all that outstanding, I guess. He's been definitely serviceable down back, but not a star performer. I think people have been a bit more impressed with Duday, in fact. So I really can't see him coming in, but you never know. We're just going to have to wait until Friday. But I think we'll probably see a restructuring with probably Laird, the primary candidate, or maybe even a Cheney to take Brown's lockdown small defender role. But I mean, all of them are capable of providing rebound as well, so adding in a Seedsman in there probably won't hurt us too much, especially considering we're facing Carlton. Coming in for them, they have got Armfields returning from injury, as well as Buckley, Graham and Tutt in their squad. And coming out is Kieran Byrne, who unfortunately went down with an ACL injury last week, so he'll be out for the next 12 months. Notable omissions for them, we've actually got probably both of our squads will be almost as strong as you could get, except for Carlton's captain, Mark Murphy, who's currently still injured. That's probably the only notable omission there. And of course, we'll go back to last match we played against them. Round 10, 2015 at the MCG. This was an absolute shit fest. We snuck over the line by 9 points. Jenkins kicked 5 goals in a best on ground performance. Murphy 36 touches, and I think everyone deleted the replay of that match as soon as it was done. Carlton over the past few weeks, though, Hank, they've been pretty bad. Have you watched any of their games?
A little bit. Probably, after their, 6 wins in a row, they might have run out of gas, I guess. They're when you're a pretty poor team and you get on a bit of a run, it's easy to have a letdown. Haven't been able to get back on the horse, but, I mean, they're solid, and, any game away from home is another good test. With the ladder so close at the moment, it's every game is you can't take for granted. We've seen teams like, as good as Geelong's playing, they've been able to fall to Carlton and Collingwood and whatnot. So I think we're still going to have to be on our absolute, 100% intensity and attention to detail to, as Walsh would say, get the job done.
Do you reckon we're a sneaky chance to lose this, or is this a firm win for us?
I think it's a firm win, but I'm just making the point that I wouldn't want any of our players to go in with a hint of complacency, because I reckon barring Brisbane and Essendon, I reckon every team in the comp is good enough to take advantage of that. So, no, the way that the Crows at the moment, I'm pretty confident of a solid win, but I don't think that's any guarantee at the moment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've noticed over the past couple of weeks, especially against Melbourne, is that we do have the quality to win away from home. Particularly in the past, I think we might have lost that Melbourne game after what we showed in the second quarter, which was horrible. But we managed to sneak away with that 20-something point win. In fact, it was quite a convincing win in the end. So, yeah, I think we definitely have what it takes to go over to Melbourne for the second week and give in a pretty solid performance against Carlton, who've admittedly been pretty crap. But I think the one area that is really, I guess, in the favour of Carlton at the moment is probably their defence. They've got a lot of contributors down there at the moment. I mean, Wiedering's a really young gun. He's been very good. Rowe's been pretty serviceable. And they've got, Doherty and Simpson almost in all-Australian form at the moment. Do you see any of their defenders troubling us this week?
Yeah, as you said, Doherty and Simpson are probably arguably the two best small running defenders in the competition. So I've got no problem providing, run and carry. But, I mean, last week's game was, 57-45. So I would say that probably their main problem at the moment is just putting some scoreboard pressure. And, the week before, 65 against GWS, had the bye, and then 78 against St Kilda. So they're not exactly kicking big scores, and the Crows seem to be kicking 100 points at will at the moment with all our firepower up forward. So, that's probably the main area that I'd say the Crows are able to get the jump on them is Carlton's lack of ability to kick a reasonable score, and we can do that every week without even trying at the moment, it seems.
Yeah, they've got a very almost a makeshift forward line. I mean, just looking through their teams when I was sorting them into defenders, midfielders, or forwards, they've almost got maybe 8 or 9 guys that could rotate through the forward line, but I don't think any of them are actually that good. I mean, they've got Levi Casbolt up there, who's obviously a primary forward, but...
exactly. Yeah, so what are we looking at? We're looking at Casbolt.
There's Casbolt, there's Simon White. Simon White, he's
Andrew
played
Phillips.
60-something games for Simon White. I had no idea.
Yeah, that's a fair number, isn't it? Matthew Wright, we've obviously plenty of discussion on him last year.
Yeah, definitely.
Cruiser can provide a bit up forward, but yeah, there's a lot of makeshift, probably middle of the road tools there that get in a game at Carlton because it's Carlton. So Silvani showed a bit last week. Dale Thomas can turn it on. The Kedge, he's handy. He can provide some scoreboard pressure. But just from a tall forward perspective, it's looking a bit thin for Carlton. And with Talia and Lever had a bit of a poor game last week, but that might be expected for a youngster. But our tall defenders are in reasonably good form at the moment, so you would think that they'd have a relatively comfortable task as long as the ball's not flying inside 50.
Yeah, I think it's more this week, as well as a lot of other weeks, more their medium guys that they can chuck in the forward. So the players like your Walker, your Armfield, your Sumner, even Andres Everett rotating through there, those could trouble us. But even then, their actual ability in the forward line, I just don't really rate it at all. They're more suited to, your half-forward role or your, outside wing-ish position. And even there, they're not particularly great. So, they're going to struggle big time in the forward line, whereas I think we have a lot more contributors in that zone. But it also is worth looking at their midfield. I mean, they've got some guns there. They've got Cripps, Gibbs. I mean, if you class Daisy Thomas as a gun, he's been okay, I guess. But apart from that, their depth falls away pretty significantly after, your Curnow and Kerridge. So do you see us having a big advantage there?
I mean, the midfield's definitely lifted in the last few weeks. There was obviously a lot of discussion on the Crows leaking a lot of inside 50s and whatnot, but we've certainly addressed that. So the midfield's turned it around in the last sort of 3 to 4 weeks' time. But yeah, as you said, Carlton's midfield's not poor. Certainly plenty of quality there with Cripps, Gibbs. Kerridge has been pretty handy this year, and Dale Thomas has good in the past. But I think back onto that previous discussion on their sort of medium forwards. That's probably where they could get us if the Carlton midfield does get on top. Hypothetically, then with Brown out of the side, and let's say Seedsman comes in. I'm not sure Seedsman is the lockdown small defender that Luke Brown is. So I could easily see Silvani, Dale Thomas, even Matthew Wright, and Dennis Armfield, who might have his knockers, but he's fast and has a bit of X factor about him if he's playing well. So that's probably where we're a little bit exposed sometimes. The Jake Stringer style, 190 centimetres forward that's got a bit of pace. I think some of our defenders are known for being a little bit slow. So that's somewhere that they could get on top, but I'm still pretty confident. That's just, I guess, one area that might be able to be exploited.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, Carlton doesn't exactly have a Jake Stringer forward, so...
No, correct. No, I was just more meaning that sort of, I guess, body shape.
Yeah. Do you see their midfield being able to get on top at all, or is that not even a possibility?
Oh, I think they'll be competitive. But, I mean, we've got pretty much our best midfield in there at the moment. Both Crouch boys, Thompson. Jacobs has turned it around a little bit as well. He was struggling earlier in the year. Rory Sloane's leading the coaches' votes at the moment, so he's probably in Brownlow contention. Douglas has lifted. Charlie Cameron's now playing in the midfield as well. He's looked at his stats a few days ago, and it's quite interesting, his sort of change in position, I guess. Last year it was all sort of 2 goals a game, but not a lot of possessions. But I think Charles, as he wants to be known now, upwards of, I think he's gone from 10 disposals to 14 disposals a game, and pretty much up in every area other than goals. So, even he spending time in the middle, and I think, can't remember who it was, someone on 5AA said that he might be our most important player. Where our midfield is strong, but it's a bit slow. So for someone that can provide a bit of pace in the middle, and when he's playing well, I think that gives a bit of extra drive and zip that we might not normally have if he's down on form.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's one of many younger players in our team that have definitely lifted from last season. I think pretty much that entire group of guys who have played less than 50 games have improved across the board. I mean, even Atkins is a guy that was really struggling towards the end of last year. He was dropped for the final against Hawthorn, but he's come out this year and he's been, absolutely fantastic. We've seen McGovern come in, and these sort of guys, they're performing really well. And Atkins, both Crouches is...
Yeah. Oh, I mean, obviously both Crouches were, maybe struggling a little bit early in the year, especially Brad, but, they've Brad's output was pretty good on last Sunday. Matt's had easily his best year in his career so far, and Rory Atkins has been a revelation. To be, what was he, pick 81, I'm pretty sure he was the last pick in the draft for his draft year, in the year that we had our draft sanctions. So to be able to get that amount of output from someone like him, who was really, probably a speculative pick, in the year that we took him, he's winning 20 disposals a game, uses the ball well, good sidestep, quick, good goal sense. Oh, he's got, he's excellent.
Yeah, it's really surprised me because I think... Sorry, he's one of the guys that I probably didn't have in my best 22 coming into the season, but he's really proven me wrong there, and he's definitely cemented his spot for sure in that midfield mix. One of the interesting things, though, is that the list profile between Carlton and Adelaide actually isn't that different in terms of, the sort of brackets of how many games people have played. They've got 10 guys who've played more than 100 games. We've got 9, and they've got 8 guys who've played less than 50 games, and we also have 8 there. So it's pretty interesting, the quality in lists between us and Carlton. We've obviously have much better ability to draft, good players with our picks, I guess, but they've got a lot of high-end talent there in their team for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the talk around Carlton early in the year, obviously coming off a disastrous campaign under Mick Malthouse, about them being a developing side and needing to, make gradual steps. But as you said, they're actually a far older side than you'd expect. and their rise up the ladder is probably indicative of a coach that's up with the modern game and getting them back to. I'm not saying it's not a good improvement. To come from where they were is a good effort, but this might be more the norm for Carlton rather than last year, which was probably an aberration of a lack of confidence, I guess. So, they're no guarantee to rise up the ladder next year, considering their age profile.
No, certainly not. I think there's some people on Big Footy were sort of tossing up whether they would even regress from this year, and I think that's still a possibility. I mean, some of the players that they have that are over that 150 game marker, like your Michael Jamisons, who probably won't get too many more opportunities at Carlton, and a lot of their other older players, just looking down their list, like Sam Rowe, who's only played 65 games, but I imagine he's only got a couple of seasons left, and Cade Simpson, he's 32, so these are the sort of players that they'll be having to replace over the next couple of years with some of their young talent, and they definitely have young talent. Just that I think that their depth is still lacking considerably, considering, just this quality that Mick Malthouse was leaving that list in is very, very poor. So whether they've exceeded expectations this year, I'm not sure, but they've certainly exceeded my expectations, I think, in terms of getting 6 wins.
I mean, you can't fault what they tried to do at the draft. They pretty much blew up the list last year. I think the Menzel trade brought in 5 players or something like that. So
and they've all been quite reasonable for them too.
Yeah, so they've certainly they haven't held back with trying to, I guess, revitalise the list. So should be they're an interesting team to watch over the next few years, I'd say.
Yeah, especially considering your young guys like Harry McKay, who I think was a top 10 pick. He hasn't had a game yet, and Charlie Curnow, another young guy who's played only 4 games. So these are the sort of players they'll be looking to get into their team over the next couple of years and replace some of those older guys, you'd think. What about a whipping boy watch here? Have you seen McKay and maybe Richard Douglas over the past couple of weeks?
David McKay, you're a little bit choppy there, that's all.
David McKay.
No, I think he's definitely his output is solid. And again, it's hard for me to comment because I haven't watched a lot of our SNFL team play, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to, have a really, really strong argument against other players. So that's probably my main assessment. I mean, someone like Miller has probably got more talent, but, he's playing well, and Wayne was dropped, whatever you want to call it. What he did with the ball was reasonable, but he wasn't getting a whole lot of possessions. And the way that the Crows are playing at the moment, and with where we are in the ladder, a lot of the time the Crows fans are calling for investment in youth and development, blah, blah, blah. And I reckon with a flag on the line, I'm playing the best 22 every single week of this season. So, and I think his output has been enough to justify a spot in the 22 at the moment. Yeah,
I'd agree. I mean, I've been quite vocal against the David McKay on the forums and everything, but I mean, it'll come down to some pretty tough decisions over the next couple of weeks when we end up having a full list to choose from. I think I agree with you for sure that Miller is a really solid talent. He's been good for us in the opening rounds before he was rested, but he needs to, and he needs to, and he has been, getting those extra couple of possessions in the SNFL and working on his ability to win the ball a bit more. So I think he's going to be great for us in the future. But just for now, him developing the SNFL is good while McKay's not being the worst that we know he can be. How much do you see the Crows winning this match by, Hank?
I think I picked about high 40s, probably 40, 47, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assumption. I'm going to go with probably about your 60-point win. I think while their defense has been quite good, I think our attacking power will be way too strong. In fact, I had an interesting stat here that across the entire season, we have scored 562 more points than Carlton so far. So that's an extra 94 goals up to this point. But the amount that we've conceded between each of the teams, we've actually conceded 29 points less, so not much of a difference there.
It's quite a staggering differential there, isn't it? Like,
yeah, especially for points for, it's huge.
Yeah. So what was it? 500 points or something like that. So
94 goals.
Divide that by 14. Someone do the maths, please. It's probably 20 points a game, something like that.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. I mean,
40 points per game.
It's been long talked about, but when you've got, if Walker's not playing well, Jenkins is up. McGovern provides an extra avenue. There are so many midfielders that we've got that can hit the scoreboard, like Atkins, Douglas, Paul Seedsman, Brodie Smith, with their long kicks. And then you got Eddie, Charles, Miller when he's playing. They're just Lynch. The list goes on. And it's. I think someone on Twitter was trying to compare the Crows 2012 team when we made the prelim compared to now, and obviously Tippett and Dangerfield were handy inclusions in that squad. But when you think that our forward line back then was, from a small forward perspective, was Callanan and Petrenko, and we've now got Betts, Cameron, and a whole host of midfielders that can score, and then Miller or Menzel if they're ready. It's just chalk and cheese. Like,
yeah,
it's
we
very
have a
exciting.
much better list now than we did back then.
And again, the value of a lot of these picks. Cameron was a rookie pick. Eddie Betts was a trade. Atkins picked 81. Like, McGovern was picked 45 or something like that. So, I think where we are at the moment on the ladder is purely based on development after the draft. And, if some of those players went to other clubs, who knows what they'd be producing at the moment. But I can guarantee you they're outperforming their draft value by a fair margin.
Oh, definitely. We've managed. In fact, I reckon we definitely have the best development in the league, especially when it comes to the taller players. We've seen a lot of them leave, but we certainly have the development class there. But I think that probably wraps us up for our little look at the Carlton game. Should be an interesting one come on Sunday. But now we will get to Game of Crows. So, Hank, are you familiar with the Game of Crows in the Crowcast preview?
No, you're going to have to talk me through here. Sorry for that.
So it's basically our little prediction game regarding the upcoming Crows match of the week each week. So us and also the listeners of the show have one of two options. You can make a bold claim, which is just make a little claim about a player or a stat or something that hasn't happened this season. And if that comes up the next week, you get your 1 point. Or you can make a crazy claim, which is something that hasn't happened ever. That could be like Jenkins kicking 10 goals or something. And you'll claim 3 points there. The winner at the end of the season gets a case of beer sent to them by me. You can enter through Twitter, Spreaker comments, Facebook, Big Footy, all those places. And the current leaderboard has Joel Constable sitting on the top with 5 points. But I actually got on the leaderboard last week 1 point for suggesting that Brad Crouch would have his season high disposals, and that was correct with 26 there. Considering you're a bit unfamiliar with it, Hank, I'll start off with my prediction for this week. I reckon we'll see Charles, as he now wants to be called, Charles Cameron's season high goals of 3 goals, I reckon, against Carlton. Do you have a prediction this week?
Okay, well, I'll go out on a limb here. I'll go a bold call, and I'll go Eddie with 7 goals.
Yeah, he hasn't kicked 7 this week.
Is that a no? Does that count as a bold call, or should I go 8 to really make it?
I'm pretty confident that he hasn't kicked 7 goals this season, but I'll just do a quick little check.
No,
but if it is, of course, that will count. Everyone else can get in there. Yeah, actually, his season high this year is 5 goals for Eddie Betts.
5, okay,
even 6 will count.
Okay, we'll go with 7, just to make it big.
Has he ever kicked 7 goals?
I don't know. He'd have to go.
He kicked 8 goals in against Essendon in round 18, 2011. So not a crazy claim, but definitely a bold claim there. So we'll put you up there for that.
Sounds good.
All right, I guess moving on. So, a bit of an interesting one here. We've got a SNFL team playing a home game against Sturt on Saturdays, 2:10 p.m. at Thebarton Oval. Thebarton Oval. Okay. Yep. This is the first game for Curtly Hampton. He's finally over his foot issue. The downside there is that Sturt's a very good team, and I think they've won their past many games or something. So,
yes, Sturt are top of the ladder. I think they lost the first game of the year, so they've won 10 straight at 10-1.
Record.
Yeah, so very impressive year for them.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be really good to get Hampton into the team to see what he can do. We have still a couple of injuries and guys out of the team. Knight and Shaw, both not quite sure when they're coming back at the moment. Van Berlo will still be out for a number of weeks with his foot issue. Menzel, unfortunately, he'll be missing the second week in a row with his concussion, and Lukey Loudon down for the next couple of weeks with a hamstring issue. But I think not having to play 3 ruckmen will probably actually help our structures in the SNFL a little bit. We always seem to be a little bit top-heavy there.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously with the SNFL team, they're sort of, this might be harsh, but they're forced to play everyone on their list because that's the whole point of the team. But I think you could argue that someone like Loudon, with Deere, Ramsey, any more that I've missed, I'm not sure.
Hunter, but O'Brien,
all of them. All of them, yeah. So it was like six ruckmen / tall forwards all playing in the same team. So it's, as you say, that's probably one of the main downfalls is that if we don't mark it when we go forward, then it's going to race out of the forward 50 in no time at all. So maybe that could help our structure a little bit. And obviously Hampton will be very interesting to see how he goes. Might be a bit rusty, but his pace could be a very valuable addition to the team later in the year if we can squeeze him in.
Yeah, I mean, competition for spots is everything at the moment. I think if he can really, put in a couple of good weeks in the SNFL, he'll be putting a lot of pressure on our wingmen and our sort of rebounding defenders there. But we'll have to see how that one goes. Unfortunately, it's not televised, so we'll have to wait for the reports from people who go down there. But we'll move on to the other matches of the round. Of course, Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn is currently on at the moment. Port Adelaide appear to be up by 2 points. Who do you see taking out this match at the end, Hank?
It's just become 8 points. I know this is probably going to be a little bit weird for those that tune in tomorrow, but Chad Wingard just snapped a goal for an 8 point lead. I don't know, I picked Hawthorn, but the way that Port are playing at the moment, I'm sure their fans are very frustrated. I'm sure, a win's a win, and they'd be ecstatic about it, but you really wonder how they can get up for these sort of games and then drop other matches against Fremantle and Carlton. So, I don't know, Port are looking good here at the moment. But we'll see what hindsight delivers when people tune in tomorrow or the next day. Yeah,
we might seem like real idiots. I'm going to tip Hawthorn to win this one, but we'll see what happens because probably most people will know the result when you're listening to this now. The other match, probably almost match of the round in many respects, is Geelong versus Sydney tomorrow night, which is Friday night down at Simmons Stadium. I think Sydney's a much better team than Geelong at the moment, even though Geelong's managed to take out some big scalps, but they've lost those couple of matches to lower teams. But the fact that this has been played in Geelong, I think Geelong will probably get up. How do you see it, Hank?
Yeah, I mean, I quite like Geelong. I reckon, obviously their main question mark at the moment is playing against the lesser sides and maybe, being a bit complacent and dropping their intensity and whatnot. But when you play finals, you play the top 8 teams, and they've done pretty well against those sort of those teams. So, at home as well, and it's a must-win game. Obviously, with 6 teams on 10 wins, is it 6? Yeah, 6. Yeah. So every win is absolutely crucial, and I think home side plus the requirement to lift and deliver, I would say the Cats in a close one.
Yeah, it will certainly be one to watch tomorrow night. I'm pretty excited to see how that one goes down. I'll be cheering on, I don't know, Sydney. They're both pretty bad teams.
It's very hard to,
just so many bad players.
Multiple reasons as a Crows player to go against both teams.
Yeah. Oh well, it should be still an interesting game to watch. How about West Coast versus North Melbourne? This is the other team, the other match, sorry, regarding top 8 players at the moment. This is over in Perth on Sunday afternoon. I don't rate North at all. I think they'd still make the top 8 quite comfortably, but they've really slipped over the past couple of weeks since they won their first 9 games in a row. And West Coast, they're pretty strong at home, Hank.
They are, yes. Obviously the game against the Crows was, I think, their first loss they're only their second loss at home in probably 2 years or something like that. So they're very strong at home, and North are struggling a little bit. They did have the bye last week, so they might that refresher could be handy for them. But Eagles at home is very hard to tip against, and they do have Nat Nui out, so that might hurt. But yeah, Eagles at home for me.
Yep, I agree on that one as well. The other matches, we're all concerning lower-ranked teams for most of the time. I think one of the ones that I'll be watching with a little bit of interest, just because I kind of like watching Melbourne, is Melbourne versus Fremantle up in Darwin. This is on Saturday night, and this is an interesting one because Melbourne have apparently lost their past 6 or 7 matches against Fremantle, and they've also lost their past 4 matches up in TIO Stadium. But at the moment, Melbourne seems to be in a lot better form than Fremantle. So it could be an interesting one up there.
Yeah, Fremantle was such a hard team to read at the moment. Obviously they had the horrendous start. A lot of their older players were probably looking past it. They managed to string some form together, won 3 in a row, and then they played Collingwood, and I didn't see it, but many people were saying it was arguably the worst first half of football they've ever seen. So clearly,
it was terrible. I watched it. It was a shocker.
Clearly, Fremantle are still a work in progress or on the decline. But that being said, Melbourne, despite Northern Territory being Melbourne's second home, I think their record up there is horrendous. Every time they play Port up at Alice Springs, they lose. I'm not sure what their record is at Darwin, but
it's pretty bad. It's one of those things where they trade money for the club, which I think they need, being one of those lower Melbourne teams. They trade it for wins, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, like for a team like Melbourne, I mean, obviously the gap between the top 8 and the bottom 8 is quite large this year, so maybe it wouldn't have helped. But you play Port and Fremantle at the MCG, and you'd probably say that's 2 wins there. So, and yes, Fremantle are struggling, and they clearly had a horrible year, but I reckon Fremantle's the sort of side that can perform on their day with, still a number of, grand final players from only a few years ago. So it should be a close one.
Yeah, I'll be tipping Melbourne in that one. I think there's not too many other exciting games this week. Hank, is there anything else that you want to highlight out of the remaining matches? We have GWS versus Collingwood, Gold Coast versus Brisbane, the Q Clash. We've got Bulldogs versus Richmond and Essendon versus St Kilda.
No, I think I missed my tip. I did tip Melbourne, but there's no confidence whatsoever in that. GWS should win by a truckload. Their home form is excellent. Gold Coast have, started to put it together a little bit. They've got a pretty good team in there at the moment. The only players they're missing, I think, are Swallow and O'Meara from a first team perspective, or a gun first team perspective.
Yep.
So I think they'd be pretty safe at home. Dogs at Etihad are always hard to beat, and Richmond, probably put the queue in the rack. And Essendon St Kilda really doesn't get you all that enthused to watch that game, I would say. Saints, yep. But, hopefully no one watches.
Yep, I agree. GWS by heaps, Gold Coast by heaps against Brisbane, Bulldogs by heaps against Richmond, and St Kilda by heaps against Essendon. I think most of those games should be pretty clear-cut. And Brisbane, just at the moment, they are shocking. And, yeah, they really need to do a number on their club to get it back up to the heights of 10, 15 years ago. It's a bit unfortunate for them at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you compare them to Sydney, and, Brisbane made a grand final in 2004, and Sydney won the flag in 2005, so they're not too far apart, and one team has completely and utterly collapsed, and the other has missed the finals once since then. So it's quite staggering that this is a club that won 3 flags in a row. Like, it just hasn't given them any sort of lift since that era at all. And they've got some reasonable players in there. Rockcliffe, Rich, who else? Maybe that's why they're not doing too well. I'm struggling after two names.
Well, there's Zorko and Hanley
Zorko
and
and Hanley.
Shaki up front and all those guys.
Yeah, so they've got their four top players are all guns, and all can. I think Daniel Rich is the sort of person that if he was playing in Hawthorn, he wouldn't be tagged as much as say some of he is in Brisbane, and could be a handy player for another AFL side. So, you'd be concerned as a Brisbane supporter if your captain, who's been so loyal to that side, decides to leave as well. There was the rumor, the jungle drums about Tom Rockcliffe leaving. So, they might get something good in return, but it's not a good indicator that if he's leaving as well.
No, there's definitely something up there. It's really sad for their supporters. I mean, to go through so many years of being crap, you'd have to wonder, why you're even bothering supporting that team. Same thing would have been happening to Melbourne supporters, before Port came a little bit good. There's, they'd be going through that sort of thing too. So, it's just sad to see. Not necessarily sad to see Port be good, but Port be bad. Sorry, but it's sad to see your Brisbanes and your Melbournes be bad, unfortunately. So hopefully they turn it around. But I think that probably brings us to the end of the Crowcast preview for round 16, getting right through the season already. And just want to thank all our listeners. The Melbourne cast last week was our most listened to cast ever, so thanks everyone for continuing to share the cast with all your Adelaide supporting friends, liking us on Twitter and Facebook, and giving us those reviews on iTunes. It's all appreciated. We have all the rest of our casts. Phoenix will be back on Sunday at 7 p.m. Adelaide time to go through the review of our Carlton game. The Crowbar will be back on Monday. As always, it's a ripping cast if you haven't listened to it already. And Tuesday Night Live will once again be, of course, on Tuesday. So thanks for joining me, Hank.
Good to be on. Thanks for having me again. Hopefully be a more regular contributor from here on. And maybe I can do the grand final podcast as well.
That would definitely... I think everyone will be wanting to get on that one. Yes. That'd be nice. Very nice. Yes, thanks for joining me, Hank. And yeah, if you want to listen to this cast, of course, we'll be back next week on Thursday, 7:30 p.m. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
See you, folks.